have any news to report. So we'll go ahead and just continue with the agenda. Miles, would you please read the statement regarding virtual meetings?
Sure. The statement has not changed. It's the same statement we've been using. So members of the public who are interested in the meeting can attend. There's a live stream on YouTube. Also able to participate using the chat function in the Zoom meeting. The link to attend that is in the agenda. We also take written input at rrtpo@planrva.org, and any comments are shared with the TAC during the meeting. Nothing's changed on that.
Okay, thank you, Miles. Janice, would you mind calling the roll, please, and certifying a quorum?
Hold on 1 second for me. Okay, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Here.
Charles City County, Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith. Miss Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne. Mr. Coleman. Hanover County, Chair Vidunez.
Here.
Renko County, Miss Smidler.
Here.
Mr. Yor. New Kent County, Miss Inman. Here. Miss LaDuke. Powhatan County, Mr. Cirillo. Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Miss Clark.
Here.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Mr.
Here.
Wagner. Oh, thank you. GRTC, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Mr. O'Keefe.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Simmons. VDOT, Ms. Rhodes.
Here.
And Ms. Mueller. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Janice. Next item is consideration of amendments to the agenda. Do we have any amendments to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item, which is approval of the August 8, 2023 TAC meeting minutes. Do we have any changes or amendments to the minutes?
No, Mr. Chair. So moved to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion from Dorona. Do we have a second?
John O'Keefe, I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Is this a voice vote? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, thank you. Next item, item 6 is opportunity for public comment. Do we have anybody that wishes from the public that wishes to speak?
We haven't received any comments to my knowledge, and there's nobody participating online right now.
Okay, very good. So no public comments. We'll move to the next item, TAC chair report. Don't really have anything. Don't have anything to report. I did attend the VDOT LAP workshop last week. I saw some of you all there. Always find it an opportunity to learn something. And I learned a couple things that I didn't know. Sometimes I think I know it all, and I attend and pick up a few things. I did. It was interesting. And for those of you that work with consultants on design, we use percentages to determine the progress. And I learned that VDOT actually has, they'll use 60% for right-of-way plans, whereas or some consultants would use 60% versus 90%, and it was just interesting to see that. And I wasn't aware of that. It's a little thing, but it was something that I didn't know. So, and now I do. Anyway, enough of that. We'll move on to more important things like the tip. So, Miles, would you present this item, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is the illustrative projects list that we've been discussing for about 6 months. Just as a quick refresher, federal regulations allow an MPO to maintain a vision list in the tip, just like we do in the long range plan. This is outside of the financial plan, so it's unconstrained. So there are no impacts to our financial plan or to conformity from having this list. It's basically just the MPO's endorsement of additional projects that we would wish to implement in the near term if we had money. The intent on putting this together is to have a standing list of endorsements for discretionary grants and earmark applications, since they all ask about whether the project's in the tip. This is sort of an in-between step, since we don't put projects into the tip that can't be funded. This is sort of an in-between compromise, still allowing it to be in the tip, and we can point to it without being in the constrained portion. All the projects that are listed in this section are required to be consistent with the LRTP. That includes the vision list in the LRTP, because again, this is intended to support discretionary funding, which is not included in that financial plan either. Last month, we presented you with a list of projects that was drawn from previously endorsed discretionary grant applications. And we asked the localities to review and add any projects that we might have missed. From the revisions, Chesterfield and Henrico provided updates to the estimates across the board. A lot of those were drawn from old planning level estimates from several years ago in the LRTP, so they weren't up to date. We had one additional Chesterfield project that hadn't been captured, but is going through a grant cycle right now. We did not, and we received multiple questions about this, we did not include any projects that had only been submitted for smart scale only. And the reason that we didn't include those is that those applications, during the smart scale process, we have to endorse anything that's going to go on the COSS, the corridors of statewide significance, and anything that's not already listed in the constrained plan. So we're going to be providing an endorsement resolution for all of those projects anyway. We can just cover it at the same time. It's already built into that process. So the action that we're asking for TAC today is that TAC should recommend approval of the requested amendment to the FY 24 to 27 tip to create this illustrative project section. And the tip blocks are included in your agenda as attachments. This would be added as sort of a third section after the ungrouped projects, the group projects. Then we have the illustrative projects, with a brief introduction stating that these are not funded and we're supporting them for any discretionary applications to make sure it does serve as that standing recommendation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Dirona.
Okay, Dirona.
Thank you. Miles, do you mind, because I took a look at the list. I know that Richmond had, was it like the Jackson Ward and maybe even the North South? And I couldn't remember whether it was on this type of list or was it the vision list?
So we didn't include either of those projects because they have been awarded funding. So basically, these were the projects that have been unsuccessful in getting funding, and there's still a gap to be able to actually move them into the constrained tip still, whereas both of those projects have funding and are being incorporated into the tip or the UPWP as needed.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. This is Chessa.
Okay, Chessa.
Hey, Miles, does this mean that if we were to get one of these grants that that the tip would be updated quicker?
It doesn't change anything on that process.
Okay.
Really, the only thing was that you can point to the tip and say, yes, these
It's
are
in
near-term
there.
priorities for the
Okay.
TPO. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey, anybody else have any questions? Okay.
I'm sorry. I
Okay,
have one more
yes.
question.
Yes, go ahead, Dorona.
And then I guess Miles, what's our planned process for like updating this list? Is it just when we get a few of them? Is it going to be one time, or how does that work?
Sure. So just like we've been updating and providing letters of support and resolutions of endorsement for your applications as you get ready to gear up for the grant cycle, we're trying to get ahead of this a little bit. So as we start gearing up, we've tracking all of the NOFOs. So we're trying to get ahead of that schedule, but we'll be asking for any applications that are going into this program. And the same process will be screening. We'd make sure that the project's already in the LRTP. We'd make sure that it is regional in character, and then we could amend it. The great thing with the illustrative projects section is because it's not constrained and there's no impacts to conformity. A lot of this can be handled at the staff level as adjustments are needed. We don't need to go through the formal amendment process for a lot of this. So that's the one benefit to doing it this way, is it creates a streamlined approach.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else before I call for the vote? Well, I need a motion, of course, first. Let's see, this is a roll call vote.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Dorona with the second, Gary Mitchell with the motion. Janice, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Amos,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
Chair Vadunez,
Aye.
Ms. Smidler,
Aye.
Ms. Inman,
Aye.
Ms. Clark,
Aye.
Ms. Dubinsky,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson,
Aye.
Mr. Bushing,
Aye.
Mr. O'Keefe,
Aye.
and Ms. Rhodes.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you for that. Move on to the next item. Barbara J. Cox is going to give us a presentation on some rural public transportation options.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm happy to be with you here this morning. I'd like to refer you to page 15, I believe it is, in your agenda packet for kind of a summary of where what I'd like to touch on this morning. I think many of you were at the TPO meeting on the 7th of September, and we had an excellent presentation by Tiffany Dubinsky about some alternatives for serving the rural or smaller jurisdictions, those that are outside of the fixed route GRTC network. And I think that was really, it's been discussion over the summer by many of our smaller jurisdictions because they are yearning for alternatives even to microtransit or different innovative ways that they can really serve their constituents, whether it be just for medical or for all trip purposes. And I think Tiffany's presentation did touch on some other options, the Shengo program in Shenandoah, Afton Express, Bedford, Otter Bus, Lynchburg Microtransit, and then some case studies that they've looked at with Mountain Empire, and of course our own approach in Hanover County, which I think has been so successful that we would like to make sure we don't lose sight of, because that really does set a good model for us all. But we wanted to take it a little bit further, get into I think the direction that the TPO has given us is to use this direction that we have set with DRPT with their presentation to develop recommendations on the best use of the programs covered in the presentation, in order to provide a sustainable and a physically constrained public transportation service that could serve potentially the entire Richmond region. So our recommended action would be to ask you to consider appointing members to a reconvened public transportation work group to study the question and provide a recommendation to the full TAC. At such point there are opportunities for future funding, not only for, of course, for supporting operations for a specific service, but also for the planning and technical assistance that would be required to explore some more innovative and sustainable ways of providing this transportation. So that is what I'm asking for you to consider today, and we'd entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Barbara. I have a question. How many members and kind of what's the composition do you foresee for this working group?
Well, I think that is, from the standpoint of what the public transportation work group has consisted of, it was generally all of the jurisdictions were represented. That is subject to your discussion and consideration today. If it would just be the smaller jurisdictions that would continue on through this more intensive period of study for looking at alternatives.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I guess.
Yes, Amy.
I do think it's probably helpful to have the rural jurisdictions be the primary participants, similar to the working group that came together for the trail, that was really the larger jurisdictions. This might be an opportunity for us to get together and really talk about what our needs are, because they are unique. So I would recommend that we kind of keep it to that group. And if others want to participate on that, that's great. But I do think it's important that the rural jurisdictions participate in this, because that's who we're hearing from on the TPO board. So I think you and I might be the only ones here today, and Mr. Mitchell that might fit into that category.
Okay.
Agreed.
And Mr. Chair, this is Diana. Yeah, I totally agree that I think the rules should definitely take the lead, but definitely leaving the option for, somebody who likes transit and interested, like myself, for Richmond, to sit in and as well as participate. Things.
Okay, so I guess the action calls for convening the committee. Would we actually select those participants with this action, or is this really just first step, just agreeing that we would convene a committee to look at this, or a work group?
I think we're asking for you to to reconvene a committee, and whether you want to take it as far today as appointing specific people to serve on that committee, or just leave it at just the rural jurisdictions would be the primary members of the convened committee. I think whichever way you want to go.
I might recommend, Mr. Chairman, that we keep it to the rural jurisdictions and let the rural jurisdictions appoint people. And whether it's the TAC member or if they have somebody else that might be more involved in it, let them kind of put forward their person.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just to clarify, if we're talking about the rural jurisdictions, we're talking about everybody except for Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield.
Correct.
Now, Dorona, you did mention that, you agreed with the rural jurisdictions being the primary participants in this, but your interest and expertise and transit could be of value as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would, maybe can we do
Anybody.
like, Mr. Chair, if we could do maybe like the rules are required for this convening and the large are optional? And then like Amy's saying, like if the optional locality wants to put forth the name to be on it, but we don't want to, take away too much that this working group also kind of does work with the overall GRTC plan annually. So, just thinking about, again, not changing the structure too much that is not effective when we need it another time.
Okay. I see
Mr.
Sharon
Chair,
has-
this is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted, this is Sharon with
Yes.
Henrico. I agree with Dirona. I think it would be nice to have an optional participation and to keep the structure the same. Of course, have the rurals take the lead given this topic, but Henrico would like the option to participate along with the city.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Jess had her hand up, then John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I concur with the approach with the rules taking the lead, and we'd also like to be on as optional as we have. Much of our county is very rural as well. So we would like to learn about other solutions that may in the future apply to some of our rural areas as well. So that sounds great.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wanted to let you know that Ride Finders would like to also be part of this work group, as we do a lot of the rural commutes as well as within the larger counties in the city. So we definitely like to be part of this work group if we could. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think I would like to make a motion that that we move forward with having the rural localities take the lead on this, and that they are required to attend this work group meeting. And any of the other jurisdictions that would like to attend to participate on that they're welcome to do that. But I do think it's important that the rural localities outside of Henrico, Chesterfield, and Richmond are required to participate. So I'll
Second.
make that motion, if we can make that into a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion, Miles has his hand up.
Sure, just to clarify on the motion, does this also include DRPT and GRTC for advisory purposes as needed?
So I think advisory, if they, yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a good assumption.
Mhm, yeah. We'll coordinate with them.
Yes, please.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion before we take a vote on this?
I guess one other point of clarification, and this isn't necessarily part of the motion, just more for discussion. We have Bay Transit that does a great job for us and Charles City. So we will most likely want to bring them into the conversation as well as GRTC.
Miles,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Miles, did you have your hand up again, or is that from?
No, sorry, I haven't taken it
Okay,
down.
all right. Nora, did you have a comment?
I did, and I just wanted to comment before I voted. I don't have strong feelings either way. I'm happy to support the motion, but if others want to come and attend or vote, I'm not concerned one way or the other. I'd be happy for their perspective and expertise because, they've been dealing with it a little bit longer.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I have a comment.
Yes.
So, when Amy said something about Bay, I know we've been trying to just do an exercise looking at all of the kind of rural transit providers that are providing services in the region itself. And so I would definitely say that, not naming Bay specifically, but I think that maybe having kind of ex officio kind of people come into these meetings and, give input could go even greater than just Bay, but just maybe, you have even PAT that could service some of the lower ends. So I think it's a good thing that everybody is interested in this. And we definitely want the rules to take the lead, but I do think that we can accomplish a lot by not, limiting people and how we look at this group, again, because it was envisioned for both rural and urban. And so I would just like to say that.
Okay. I think we have some consensus around all of this. So we do have a motion and a second, and this is a roll call vote. So we'll go ahead. Excuse me, a voice vote. So I will ask all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Do we have any opposed? Okay, we do not. Very good. Thank you, Jacob, Barbara, and all the good comments on that. Our next item is a VDOT Smart Scale update.
Good morning, everybody. I feel like this is just a weird continuing series. All right, so I can go ahead and get started. We had a lot of changes over the summer, and then the CTB took August off, and actually tomorrow we're going to pick back up on where Smart Scale is headed and the changes. Today's discussion, I'll give a quick overview of the retreat objectives. The CTB held a Smart Scale retreat in July. And give some insight into that experience. Process overview of where we are in the overall process changes. There was a brief summary of briefing to date, and then analysis of recommendations to date. So next steps, or next slide, sorry. Okay, so here's where we are with the various changes. And I think right now we're looking at 7 to 8 changes that are being discussed as part of the overall process update. The first is a change to application cap limits. We've discussed this previously. Current limits are 10 and 4. The floor that's being discussed, so the lowest change that's being considered is taking 10 and 4 to 5 and 2. So that is being discussed. The number of applications, like the amount being reduced, is not solidified, but I would just expect that there is a reduction in application caps coming. So for general awareness. The other dynamic going on with application limits is right now there's 2 tiers to it. You are either a large or a small. Large currently gets 10, small gets 4. We're likely to see some additional stratification with that. So instead of seeing, I mentioned the 5 and 2 caps, it might be 5, 3, 2. Where we might see just some more opportunity there on that front. Readiness changes, as with when I presented to you all in June, or maybe it was July, the readiness of how, what the readiness changes are going to look like. The how piece is still not super clear, but we do know that readiness will be heavily streamlined, and it's moving towards a more proactive approach. So one of the key features of that is pre-applications are likely not going to be conditionally screened in anymore. They're going to be conditionally screened out until certain readiness checklists are achieved for the potential project. And then last but not least, there's discussion about tying consensus funding decisions to performance in delivering projects. There is very little information on how this would work, but where this would fall into place is on odd years, the Smart Scale scores come out in January, and that's by code. And from January until May, the CTB members developed the consensus scenario. Performance and delivering projects would come in during that time frame to help inform the CTB members' decision. How that would work, how much it would help, what the information would be, we have no details about this at this time. There may be more coming tomorrow. It is an agenda item for tomorrow's CTB meeting, but at present we have pretty limited information. So next slide. Okay, so we have two major changes likely coming down for the HPP funding. The first is project type eligibility. HPP projects, we're going to start seeing a tighter definition of what those projects look like. By code, HPP funding is intended for projects of regional or statewide significance. So there's a push in the redesign of the program of the smart scale process that would push projects more towards larger scale, regionally significant projects. The second change coming to HPP is the elimination of step 2 in the allocation scenario process. The step 2 is probably one of the more challenging steps, but step 1 is, of course, allocate DGP by smart scale score, so allocate the district grant funding. Step 2 is to fund projects that would have been funded with DGP but weren't eligible, so they're funded with HPP. That step would be removed from the allocation scenario. Current talk of how the allocation scenario would work is that DGP step 1 stays the same, and then HPP step would be a sorting by smart scale or sorting by benefit score. We've seen both sorts in previous rounds of smart scale, but it's unclear how HPP would be sorted as the allocation scenario with the removal of step 2. So those are the two changes for HPP. Next slide. This is just a little more detail about the project type eligibility and where we're pulling the definition of this project types. You can see new capacity highway, managed lanes, new and improved interchanges. So much larger scale projects would be the aim of tailoring the HPP funding. Next slide. Okay, so we have 3 scoring changes that are under consideration. The first is the somewhat of a simple one, and we've seen the pendulum swing on this a few times. Congestion benefit would be scored based on 10-year, or congestion benefits would be analyzed based on congestion analysis 10 years in the future. Rounds 1 and 2 were actually a more proactive congestion approach. In round 3, it switched to congestion being today's congestion standards. And so we're just seeing the recommendation swing out back to a more proactive approach for congestion scoring. Next slide. Okay, economic development. There is very little on the changes that would be happening to the economic development scoring factor. This will be presented for the first time publicly at tomorrow's CTB meeting. The OIP engaged VEDP to develop a more forward-looking methodology. So we do know there's a goal to be more proactive, but we're not sure on any of the specific details at this time, so more to come on that particular scoring change. Next slide. Okay, one of the more solidified scoring changes is the changes to the land use factor. So this would modify the factor weighting in land use to work more as a scaling factor rather than as a factor that it is today. So land use, the land use factor is the only scoring factor that is not tied to the scope of the project in any capacity. It is tied to where the project is located. And so we were seeing in round 5 that the land use factor was impacting project scores and thereby project selection more significantly than any other factors, just simply based on where the project was located. So there's a desire to adjust this and make this a more scalable factor that would benefit the score and still benefit the project, but in relation to other scoring factors for smart scale. So next slide. This is a little demonstration of the scalability for how this would work. One of the major changes, opportunities, I would say, with the land use factor changing is the factor weights or the area type weights that are associated with land use. If the factor becomes scalable, that 10% or 20% it can now be redistributed over other factors within Smart Scale. And so it just presents an opportunity to put more emphasis on either congestion or safety, accessibility, economic development. So move to the next slide, please. So these are current weighting, current area type weightings for the area types across the state. Much of the RRTPO, I think, is area type B. Tri-Cities area is C, and then the rest of the Richmond district is area type D. Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia are the only area type A's in the state. And so you can see the fourth column in land use. And so those percentage points would be available for redistribution among the other factor areas. Next slide. So there is a staff weighted recommendation for where those percentage points can end up based on area type. And so you can see the bottom table is what's being suggested of where to redistribute those points. And for the major focus coming out of the staff recommended weighting is, of course, putting the points on some breakout of safety and congestion. Next slide. Okay, so where we are in this process. September, they're doing the retreat, as I said, tomorrow's CTB meeting. So there's the retreat summary, and then some additional items are coming in that are of interest. We're going to learn more about the project performance approach and the economic development approach. So those are going to be major items that come up at tomorrow's meeting for discussion. The final draft of recommendations is going to be presented to the CTB in October. And so we'll have a look at what the sort of holistic look of what is intended for change to the Smart Scale process will be presented at that time. November is going to host a virtual town hall. More information on that virtual town hall will be presented at tomorrow's meeting and how that can move forward. I will say, if you have comments or questions or anything at this time, please get them to me and I can send them up appropriately. I have been, getting information from the Tri-Cities MPO that we are working on getting submitted as well. So there's an opportunity to speak now. You don't have to wait until the town hall. And then December, of course, is when the policy is adopted. That's pretty much on brand with Smart Scale. We typically adopt new policies in the December timeframe. And so that's when we'll know what we're dealing with for round 6. And then, of course, March 1st, 2024, pre-applications open for round 6. So it's coming faster than I think any of us want. But yes, that's where we are on the Smart Scale review process. So I can take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was fantastic. A lot of information. I'll be honest, I don't digest it all, but I didn't either before either. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah? If not, I do have a question. I was hearing that there might be some changes affecting bike ped in terms of total dollars available for those types of projects in the program. Is that true, or?
So there's no, at present, Joe, I'm not aware of any dynamic where we're relating dollars available to bike ped directly. The change in the HPP factor of sort of focusing the investment of HPP on a certain type of project at present omits bike ped facilities being the principal improvement type. There's nothing in the current list that is bike ped specific. That doesn't preclude a widening from having a trail or a sidewalk or of those natures, but there's nothing where bike ped would be the principal improvement type that would be HPP eligible based on these changes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Sulab.
I see that we have two different area types for the MPA boundary now, since the whole District 15, excluding the Tri-Cities, is in the MPA boundary now. I think the area types would be one. I think that needs to be corrected. It has to be area type B for the whole reason, rather than B and D.
So Sulab, I pulled that map from the round 5 technical guide. So I don't know where we are in potentially updating that. If that is to be updated, it would be something that this group would certainly be aware of, and we'd need to speak with New Kent County to make sure that they're comfortable with that change as well. So I'm not sure that's moved forward in the process. The MPO boundary change is impacting several things, smart portal, smart scale related. So this will be addressed, and there are discussions of addressing it holistically ahead of round 6. But I don't think we've gotten to the point where it needs to be, where we've determined that that correction needs to occur. So there are preliminary discussions. Folks will be brought in when we're ready. I think the OIP team is a little hyper focused on the process at the moment. But then we'll hopefully get those things ironed out well before the opening of round 6.
Yeah, thank you.
Chessa and then Sharon.
Hey, Sarah. My question, I don't know how much if you can answer, but V-Trans needs, isn't V-Trans going through an update right now? And are they, I think in the schedule I last saw a while ago, midterm needs were going to be prioritized in the fall or winter and long term after that. So I didn't know, like, as we're going through and pulling together our projects so we can check if it need a V-Trans need, I didn't know if the status of the updates to the needs is going to be overlapping with, you know, developing our smart scale projects.
So yes, the needs update is in process, and thank you for bringing that up, Chessa, because the V-Trans needs is also an agenda item on tomorrow's CTB meeting, workshop
okay.
meetings. So
right.
we'll learn a little more at this time.
Okay.
I don't think we initially V-Trans needs were supposed to be identified and locked in October. I think it's going to be December until we know. I do know this, it is a refresh using the existing processes. So the goals have been refreshed, but we are doing a refresh. We are not whole scale changing how needs are identified.
Okay.
So I don't anticipate major changes to the needs based on that approach. However, we'll know more after the meeting tomorrow. And so that's basically all I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks, Sarah, for the updates. Does adjusting the high priority project types eliminate the eligibility of local or commuter transit routes for smart scale?
So the HPP adjustment does not include local or commuter transit routes. It has fixed guideway and major rail service.
Okay, and so the local or commuter transit routes would not, I guess if they just stay within the jurisdiction, that would be the definition of local or commuter transit routes, or I don't know, I can look that up.
Yeah, I will. You're right. The definition is in fact murky. For example, the BRT and BRT extensions would still qualify for HPP. I think maybe that might be your question. And so,
Thank you.
yeah, that was something we clarified when this initially came up, because all of our BRP project improvements are HPP funded for the most part. And so just having those continue to be eligible was important. So they are still in the mix and would continue to be eligible. But local service and commuter service are not HPP eligible at this time. Within the current definition that they're aiming for, I'm trying to say.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you again, Sarah. That was fantastic. So we'll move on to our next item, which is Miles, you're up again.
Sure. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This is the last item I have. This is just a quick update on fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 30 flexible regional funding. If you'll recall, this is the new name for the STBG CMAQ carbon reduction combined program. So we have a draft schedule. It's in your agenda, but basically the most important things to highlight: applications will open next month, and it'll be a 1-month application window. So October 2nd until November 3rd. We'll have project presentations through the middle of November, clarify any questions we have on the applications. Scoring through the end of the calendar year. Our goal is to bring the January TAC meeting, the draft priorities, so prioritized list of existing and new projects, use that to develop the allocations plan by February, and TPO approval by March. This is compressing the schedule a little bit. Usually we've been hitting in April or May approval. We're trying to get that done a little earlier this time so that we can line up with Smart Scale. So as we go into the pre-app process, you'll have a good idea of what leverage would be available for any of those applications. The other big thing to highlight from the staff report is the estimate of available funding. So this is obviously a snapshot. These numbers are going to change once we have updated budgets, but this is where we were this summer when we took a look at it. Basically just under 50 million, $47 million available across the 3 funding programs. CMAQ and STBG, that's really just the normal annual amounts, but the big change is we had almost the entire carbon pot unallocated. So that's adding a big boost to what we normally see. So quite a bit of funding available to support the projects. I think this is an opportunity to leverage for Smart Scale or get a lot of other projects that are done that aren't going to go through the Smart Scale program. So we are looking forward to quite a few applications this year. But we wanted to make sure you had this information and the schedule available. Essentially, as soon as you wrap up your CVTA applications, we'll be opening the TPO application window. So I'm trying to run both these processes together somewhat concurrently. So happy to answer any questions, any other details on this.
Any questions about this item? Okay, thank you again, Miles. So our next item are transportation agency updates, beginning with Tiffany.
Good morning. So I have only 2 items for this morning. I think I've been mentioning at the policy board meeting that we held our grants recipient workshop on August 11th. I do encourage everyone that wants to get more information about how grants are administered once we award you, whether it is technical assistance, demonstration, or any of those different grant programs. We do provide a pretty good overview about all the requirements from like reimbursements and then just kind of tracking your grants over time. So that is available on our DRPT website and our YouTube page. The other opportunity update I wanted to provide is that if you sat in on the policy board meeting, I did mention TRIP, our Transit Ridership Incentive Program. We will be opening a mid-cycle grant opportunity that will be launching pending CTV action tomorrow on the revised policy, which will introduce 2 new funding programs or project categories under TRIP. So as you all know from my presentations, there is the zero and reduced fare category as well as regional connectivity. CTB will be reviewing new eligible project categories. One will be public safety and the other will be passenger amenities. So public safety can include cameras. It can also include kind of training programs, de-escalation, things of that nature. Passenger amenities can also include bus stop improvements and maintenance facilities, more capital related. So once we get approval on that, I'm crossing my fingers, we'll be able to send out information on that later this week on the opening of the mid-cycle opportunity. This will be in conjunction with kind of lining up the December action at CDP, and we will also be opening up the regular cycle for TRIP because we are carrying a healthy balance on that program. So I will provide information in my agency update document so that you can also look at the proposed legislation that's linked in the update. But if you have questions, if you think there might be a potential project that could qualify under that, please feel free to reach out and I'd be glad to answer questions. And with that, that's my update and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions for Tiffany? Okay, thank you, Tiffany. And Adrian, your update, please.
I believe that will be me. This is Corey Robinson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Corey.
No problem. Yeah, I'm filling in and giving our agency update this time. So as far as an update goes, GRTC continues to deliver on projects and services that will have impacts across the Richmond region. Earlier this month, we opened the new downtown transfer station, which was the first off-street home for transit in the Richmond region. We also restored 15-minute service on weekdays to the critical arterial Route 5, as well as all-day Saturday service on the Pulse. We are also progressing towards an October 3rd presentation of the consultant proposed alignment for the North-South BRT study, and are making steady progress towards the launch of our link or micro transit service sometime in the fall. We're making progress on shelter and trash can installation throughout all of our stops, and we are currently in the process of repurposing several of the shelters from the former temporary transfer plaza to bring essential transit infrastructure to several new locations throughout the region. And that is all I have in the way of an update. I will take any questions.
Any questions for Corey? Okay, thank you, Corey. Next up, John, Ride Finders update.
Thank you. We began the data collection and the preparation for our FY24 audit and FY23 annual report that is due on October 1st of 2023. We're in the process of meeting with Foursquare ITP regarding the Ride Finders 5-year strategic plan. We've shared many of the announcements on social media from the counties, and including, Chesterfield, Henrico, as well as some from VDOT and, RVA Bike Shares program. We've participated in Elohim's Christian Church Outreach Community Center's community event day in Henrico County, provided employer outreach efforts for our commuter assistance program for the strategic plan. We've met with DRPT for our monthly meeting to focus on the carpool pilot program. And then last but not least, Ride Finders was recognized by the Association for Commuter Transportation Chesapeake chapter as its organizational member of the year. And with that, that is the update I have for Ride Finders, and I'll be glad to take any questions anyone may have.
All right, thank you, John. Sarah, you're up again.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. The CTB meets tomorrow. Several major items on the agenda, but I would just make a note that Smart Scale and VTrans are going to be discussed, and they're probably going to be pretty significant discussion. So if you can make the time, or I will provide a summary in the not too distant future. For those of you who have them, I'm hitting everybody over the head with this, but TA and revenue sharing applications are due October 2nd, the same day that the TPO applications open. So just think of the sense of accomplishment and just excitement you're going to have for doing more applications. So that is a deadline that is fast approaching. And then Janice will send out the update, but we do have some fall line and I-64 gap update information for you all if you want to take a look. So thank you.
Thanks again, Sarah. Okay, future meeting topics, I would just simply refer you to page 20 of the agenda. There are several items listed there. Miles, I'm not sure if this is where we ask if there are other topics that we should consider, but I'll go ahead and put that out there. If there are other topics, just get in touch with Miles with those thoughts and ideas. And now I will turn it over to TAC members. Do we have any updates or comments from members of the TAC this time? Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for October 10th, 2023, 9 a.m. I will not be here. I will be traveling, and so hopefully having a good time. So Gary, I think it will be your job to run the meeting next month, and I know you'll do a great job at that.
Thank you.
And with that, we are now adjourned.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks.
Thank you.
Joe.
Thank you.
Have a good day.